My girlfriend cheated on me with her best friend, who she swore was just a friend. I found the hotel receipt in her jacket pocket while looking for my car keys. Room 314 at the Marriott downtown, checked in at 2:18 p.m. on a Thursday, checked out the next morning. The name on the credit card statement wasn't mine. It was Liam's, her best friend since college. The guy she'd told me 1,000 times was completely platonic and like a brother to her. I stood in our bedroom holding that crumpled receipt, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. The room spun. My girlfriend of 3 years, the woman I'd bought a ring for 2 months ago, had spent the night at a hotel with the one person she'd always sworn I had nothing to worry about. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was that I'd defended her. I'd defended them both to my friends, my family, even to myself, every time that voice in my head whispered that something felt off about their friendship. I'd been the idiot who said love meant trust, who rolled his eyes when my brother asked why Liam was always around, who laughed off my mom's concern about how much time they spent alone together. The receipt was dated 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks of her kissing me goodnight, making dinner plans, talking about our future, all while knowing she'd betrayed everything we had. I'd been with Olivia since we met at a work conference in Atlanta back in 2021. I was presenting on software architecture for a tech startup, and she was there representing her marketing firm. We got drinks after the keynote speech, talked until the hotel bar closed, and exchanged numbers before heading to our separate rooms. She lived 2 hours away, but we made it work with weekend visits and constant texting. After 8 months, she got a job offer in my city and moved into my apartment. It felt natural, like we'd been building toward that from the beginning. Olivia was smart, funny, ambitious, and beautiful in this effortless way that made me feel lucky every time she chose me. Her best friend Liam had been part of the package from day one. She'd mentioned him during our first conversation, actually, explaining how they'd met during freshman orientation at college and had been inseparable ever since. He was pursuing a PhD in environmental science while she was studying marketing, and somehow their friendship survived different majors, different social circles, and different life paths. When I met Liam for the first time at Olivia's birthday dinner 6 months into our relationship, he seemed fine, friendly, outgoing, the kind of guy who could talk to anyone about anything. He shook my hand, made jokes about Olivia's terrible cooking, and asked genuine questions about my work. I didn't see any red flags. Maybe I should have. The friendship itself seemed innocent at first. Group hangouts with mutual friends, occasional lunch meetings when Liam was in town for research conferences, birthday celebrations where I was always invited. But over time, the boundaries started shifting in ways I couldn't quite articulate. Liam began texting Olivia more frequently. I'd see her phone light up with his name while we were watching movies, during dinner, first thing in the morning. She'd laugh at whatever he sent and type back immediately, sometimes having entire conversations while I sat next to her. When I mentioned it bothered me. She said I was being insecure. She said Liam was her best friend and she wasn't going to change that relationship just because I felt threatened. She said if I loved her, I'd trust her. So I tried. I really tried to be the understanding boyfriend who didn't get jealous over text messages. I tried to ignore how she'd excuse herself during date nights to take his calls, how she'd light up when talking about him, how she seemed to prioritize his problems over mine. Liam was going through a breakup with his long-term girlfriend, and Olivia spent hours on the phone consoling him, giving advice, being the emotional support he needed. I understood that friends helped each other through hard times. I'd done the same for my own friends, but something about the intensity felt different, more intimate than I was comfortable with. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. The real escalation started about 6 months before I found the receipt. Liam's university was hosting a conference in our city, and he asked if he could stay at our apartment for the weekend instead of paying for a hotel. Olivia said yes without asking me first, which irritated me, but I didn't want to be the controlling boyfriend who refused to let her friend crash on our couch. Liam showed up Friday evening with a duffel bag and a 6-pack of craft beer. We ordered pizza, watched a basketball game, and the night went fine. I went to bed around midnight while they stayed up talking in the living room. I could hear their voices through the bedroom door, low and familiar, punctuated by Olivia's laughter. I fell asleep telling myself it was nothing. Saturday morning, I woke up at 9 and found them asleep on the couch together, not sitting up, but lying down with Liam's arm around Olivia's shoulders and her head on his chest. They were fully clothed, still wearing what they'd had on the night before, but the intimacy of the position made my stomach turn. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, trying to process what I was seeing, before Olivia stirred and noticed me. She jumped up immediately, explained they'd fallen asleep watching a movie, apologized for not coming to bed. Liam woke up looking confused and guilty. I said it was fine, even though it wasn't fine at all. After that weekend, I started noticing patterns I'd previously ignored. Olivia kept her phone face down on tables now, where before she'd never cared if I saw her screen. She started having work dinners that ran late into the evening, coming home smelling like wine and telling me vague stories about clients and presentations. She'd mention Liam was in town but wouldn't invite me to join them, saying they needed to catch up one-on-one. I'd ask what they talked about for hours, and she'd get defensive, accusing me of being jealous and controlling. The arguments became circular and exhausting. I'd express my concerns as calmly as possible, and she'd twist them into character flaws, making me feel like I was the problem. My best friend Noah said I should trust my instincts. He'd seen them together at a bar one night when I was out of town for work, sitting close in a corner booth, her hand on his arm while they talked. Noah didn't want to start drama, so he didn't mention it until I brought up my concerns weeks later. That information gnawed at me, but confronting Olivia about it seemed impossible without proof. She'd already convinced me once that I was being paranoid. I needed something concrete. I started paying closer attention to the details. Olivia's calendar showed client meetings on nights she came home late, but when I asked about specific clients, she'd get vague or change the subject. Her credit card statements showed charges at restaurants across town on evenings she claimed to be working late at the office. I felt disgusting going through her things, like I'd become exactly the kind of suspicious, controlling partner she accused me of being, but the inconsistencies kept piling up. One Wednesday evening, she said she had a strategy meeting with her team that would run until 10. I called her office at 8:30, and the receptionist said everyone had left at 6. When Olivia came home at 10:15, I asked how the meeting went. She described it in detail, mentioned specific colleagues who'd been there, talked about the campaign they'd discussed. All lies, delivered with perfect confidence while she kissed me hello and asked about my day. The casual dishonesty shook me more than any of the other warning signs. This wasn't a woman having an emotional affair. This was someone actively deceiving me, constructing elaborate cover stories, living a double life. I hired a private investigator 3 days later. His name was Raymond Jacobs, a retired detective who'd spent 23 years with the police department before starting his own firm. He charged me $1,800 up front and said he'd need 2 weeks for surveillance. I felt pathetic handing over my credit card, like I'd failed as a partner by resorting to this, but I needed answers. Raymond was professional and direct. He asked for photos of Olivia and Liam, their work addresses, their usual schedules. He asked if I wanted photographic evidence or just a summary report. I said both. He nodded and told me he'd be in touch. The waiting was torture. I went through the motions of normal life, going to work, having dinner with Olivia, pretending everything was fine, while inside I felt like I was slowly disintegrating. She noticed I was distant and asked what was wrong. I blamed stress at work, said I was dealing with a difficult client. She bought it without much scrutiny, which somehow made everything worse. If she loved me, wouldn't she push harder? Notice I was falling apart, insist on talking through whatever was bothering me? Instead, she accepted my explanation and went back to texting Liam. Raymond called me on a Friday afternoon, 9 days into the surveillance. His voice was careful, almost apologetic. He said he had significant findings and wanted to meet in person to review the evidence. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from my office that I wouldn't run into colleagues. Raymond showed up with a manila folder thick with printed documents and photographs. He ordered black coffee, sat down across from me in a corner booth, and laid out the evidence systematically. The first photo showed Olivia and Liam having lunch at an Italian restaurant on Monday. They were sitting on the same side of the booth, her head on his shoulder while they looked at something on his phone. The second photo showed them leaving her office building together on Wednesday evening, his arm around her waist, heading toward the parking garage. The third photo was worse. Thursday afternoon, they'd checked into the Marriott downtown. Raymond had time-stamped photographs of them entering the lobby at 2:18 p.m., going up to room 314, and not leaving until the next morning at 9:43 a.m. He'd gotten the hotel receipt through a contact who worked the front desk, confirming the room was booked under Liam's name and credit card. I stared at the photographs spread across the table and felt everything inside me go numb. Raymond kept talking, explaining chain of evidence, how everything was documented, how he could testify in court if I needed him to, but his voice sounded distant and underwater. The woman in these photos was my girlfriend, the person I'd been planning to propose to, the future I'd built my entire life around, and she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. Raymond asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I was sitting in a coffee shop looking at proof that my relationship was a fraud, that every "I love you" had been contaminated by betrayal, that I'd been too stupid or too trusting to see what was happening right in front of me. Raymond gave me time to process, then asked what I wanted to do with the information. I said I needed to think. He told me to call him if I needed anything else, packed up the folder, and left me sitting alone with my cold coffee and shattered life. I didn't confront Olivia immediately. I needed a plan. Going in emotional and accusatory would give her room to manipulate the situation, to gaslight me into questioning what I knew to be true. Instead, I called my older brother Nathan, who's a divorce attorney specializing in infidelity cases. He'd seen every kind of cheating scenario and every type of denial. I drove to his house Saturday morning while Olivia was at her supposed yoga class and showed him Raymond's folder. Nathan went through each document carefully, asked detailed questions about timelines and patterns, and finally leaned back in his chair with a grim expression. He said the evidence was overwhelming and I needed to protect myself legally and financially before confronting her. We weren't married, but we'd been living together for over 2 years, and in our state that created certain financial entanglements. Nathan drafted a cohabitation agreement termination notice and helped me open a separate bank account to protect my savings. He recommended I secure copies of all joint financial records, change my passwords on all shared accounts, and document everything. He also suggested I might want to get tested for STDs, which was a gut punch I hadn't even considered yet. Sunday evening, I found the hotel receipt in Olivia's jacket pocket. I hadn't been snooping, genuinely just looking for my car keys because mine were missing, and I needed to move my vehicle for street cleaning. Her jacket was hanging on the back of a dining room chair, and when I felt through the pockets, my fingers closed around the crumpled paper. I pulled it out and saw it was the same receipt Raymond had included in his folder, the one from 3 weeks ago. She'd kept it, either carelessly or sentimentally, and now I held physical proof in my hands. Something about finding it myself, rather than just seeing it in a photograph, made everything brutally real. I sat down on the floor right there in the dining room, receipt in hand, and started laughing. It was an unhinged, slightly hysterical sound, but I couldn't stop. All those arguments where she'd called me paranoid, all those times she'd said I was being insecure and controlling, all the gaslighting and manipulation, and here was the proof in black and white. Room 314, Liam's credit card. One night, 2 adults, checkout time 11 a.m. Olivia came home an hour later, breezing through the front door with grocery bags and talking about what she wanted to cook for dinner. I was sitting on the couch with the receipt on the coffee table in front of me. She walked into the living room, saw my face, looked down at the receipt, and stopped talking mid-sentence. The color drained from her face. She put down the grocery bag slowly and said my name like a question. I asked her to explain what I was looking at. She stared at the receipt for a long moment, and I could actually see her brain working, trying to construct a plausible lie. She said it wasn't what I thought. I asked what it was then. She said Liam had needed a place to stay because his apartment was being fumigated, and she'd offered to split a hotel room with him to save money rather than have him pay full price. I asked why they'd needed to split a room instead of just letting him sleep on our couch like he'd done before. She said I'd been weird about him staying over and she didn't want to deal with my jealousy. I asked why she hadn't mentioned any of this to me at the time. She said she knew I'd overreact exactly like I was doing now. Her explanation was so blatantly absurd that I almost laughed again. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs Raymond had taken. Her entering the hotel with Liam, his arm around her waist. Them leaving the next morning, her hair wet from a shower, both of them wearing the same clothes from the day before. Her face went from pale to red, and her expression shifted from defensive to angry. She asked if I'd been having her followed. I said yes, because she'd been lying to me for months, and I needed to know the truth. She called me controlling and obsessive, said I'd violated her privacy, said she couldn't believe I'd hired someone to spy on her. I pointed out that she'd spent the night in a hotel with another man and was now trying to make me the villain. She said nothing physical happened, they'd just talked, they'd gotten separate beds. I asked why 2 people who needed to talk required an overnight hotel stay. She didn't have an answer for that. The argument spiraled for over an hour, with her alternating between denial, justification, and offense. Finally, I asked her directly if she was sleeping with Liam. She hesitated just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know, then said it was complicated. I told her to pack a bag and leave. She said this was her apartment too. She'd been paying rent for 2 years. I couldn't just kick her out. I said fine, then I'd leave. I grabbed my laptop, my phone charger, some clothes, and drove to Nathan's house. His wife Melissa made up the guest room while Nathan ordered takeout and poured me a whiskey. I sat at their kitchen table and told them everything, from the early warning signs I'd ignored to the hotel receipt to Olivia's pathetic attempt at an explanation. Melissa, who'd always liked Olivia, looked devastated. She said she'd had no idea. She'd thought they were solid. She was so sorry. Nathan asked if I wanted to pursue any legal action against Liam for alienation of affection. I didn't even know that was a thing. He explained that in some states, you could sue a third party for interfering in a relationship, but our state wasn't one of them. He said the best I could do was make a clean break, protect my assets, and move on. I asked about the ring I'd bought. Nathan said to return it if possible or sell it if not. He said not to make any rash decisions while emotional, but to start thinking practically about separating my life from Olivia's. I stayed at Nathan's for 3 days while Olivia sent increasingly desperate texts. The first batch were angry, accusing me of abandoning her and making assumptions without letting her explain properly. Then came the sad ones, saying she missed me and we needed to talk face to face, too. Then the manipulative ones, saying she'd made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything, and she chose me. I didn't respond to any of them. On day 4, I went back to the apartment mid-morning when I knew she'd be at work. I packed up my essential belongings, took photos of everything for documentation purposes, and left my key on the kitchen counter along with a note saying we were done and she had 30 days to make other living arrangements, since my name was the only one on the lease. I changed all my passwords, removed her access from my streaming accounts, and blocked her number. It felt cold and harsh, but Nathan had drilled into me the importance of clean boundaries. The relationship was over. Maintaining any communication would just prolong the pain and give her opportunities to manipulate me. Olivia showed up at Nathan's house 2 days later. Melissa answered the door and firmly told her I didn't want to see her. Olivia started crying, begging to talk to me, saying she'd made a terrible mistake, but she loved me and we could work through this. Melissa, who's normally the sweetest person alive, told Olivia that cheating wasn't a mistake. It was a choice she'd made repeatedly over months, and I deserved better than someone who'd lie to my face while sleeping with my supposed friend. Olivia tried to push past her into the house. Melissa blocked the doorway and threatened to call the police if she didn't leave. Olivia finally left, but not before shouting that I'd regret this, and I was throwing away the best relationship I'd ever have. Nathan came home an hour later and said we needed to get a restraining order if she kept showing up. I said I'd give it another few days to see if she'd calm down. I was still processing everything and didn't want to escalate the situation unless necessary. Part of me, stupidly, was still hoping she'd just accept that we were over and move on with her life. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. The texts started coming from Liam's number the following week. He said he needed to explain what happened. It wasn't what I thought. He and Olivia had a deep connection that had evolved beyond friendship, but they'd never meant to hurt me. I read the first message and felt my blood pressure spike. This guy, who'd shaken my hand and pretended to be my friend, who'd slept in my apartment and eaten my food, was now texting me about his deep connection with my girlfriend like I was supposed to understand and accept it. I forwarded the message to Nathan, who said to save everything but not respond. Liam sent 3 more messages over the next few hours, each one more detailed and self-justifying than the last. He said he and Olivia had been fighting their feelings for over a year. He said they'd tried to stay just friends, but the emotional bond was too strong. He said the physical relationship had only started 2 months ago, like that made it better somehow. He said I seemed like a good guy, and he felt bad about the situation, but sometimes people can't help who they love. I wanted to drive to his apartment and punch him in the face. Instead, I took screenshots of everything and added them to the evidence folder. My friend group fractured immediately once word got out about what happened. Most people took my side after hearing the full story, but a few mutual friends tried to stay neutral, or suggested I'd been too controlling and driven Olivia into Liam's arms. My friend Gavin, who'd introduced me to Olivia at that conference years ago, called to apologize. He said he'd seen some suspicious interactions between her and Liam at group events, but hadn't wanted to say anything without proof. He said he felt guilty for not warning me sooner. I told him it wasn't his responsibility to police my relationship, and I appreciated him being honest now. Gavin asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime and just vent. I said yes, because sitting alone at Nathan's house dwelling on everything was making me insane. We met at a sports bar on a Saturday night, and I told him the entire story over wings and beer. Gavin listened without interrupting, then said he'd always thought I was too good for Olivia anyway. He said she had this way of making everything about her, of twisting situations so she was always the victim, and he'd noticed it long before the cheating. Hearing someone else validate my experience helped more than I'd expected. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late at the office, volunteered for extra assignments. My boss, Natalie, pulled me aside after noticing I'd been there past 9 p.m., 3 nights in a row. She asked if everything was okay at home. I gave her a brief, professional version of events, and her expression shifted from concern to fury. Natalie had met Olivia at company events and had seemed to like her. Now she said she'd always sensed something off, something performative about how Olivia acted around me in public. She said she was sorry I was going through this, and I should take time off if I needed it, but she appreciated my dedication to work. I said work was keeping me sane, and she accepted that. Having something productive to focus on kept me from spiraling into obsessive thoughts about how long the affair had really been going on and how many lies I'd believed. The worst moments were late at night when my brain would replay conversations, analyze old text messages, wonder if specific moments I'd thought were genuine had actually been deceptions. 3 weeks after finding the hotel receipt, I went to a clinic to get tested for sexually transmitted infections. The doctor who performed the exam was professional and kind, a woman named Dr. Raina Foster, who'd been practicing family medicine for 15 years. She asked routine questions about my sexual history and potential exposure, then ran a full panel of tests. She said results would be back in a week and tried to reassure me that most people in these situations came back clean. I thanked her and left feeling humiliated. Getting tested because my girlfriend cheated on me felt like a violation on top of a violation, like I was being punished for trusting the wrong person. The week waiting for results was agonizing. Every minor physical symptom made me panic, even though logically I knew most STIs didn't present symptoms immediately. When Dr. Foster called with the results, I almost didn't answer the phone. She said everything came back negative. I was clear. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. At least that nightmare scenario wasn't part of my reality. Olivia finally moved out of the apartment 4 weeks after our breakup. She hired movers and cleared out her belongings while I was at work, leaving the key in the mailbox as requested. I came home to an apartment that looked stripped and hollow, with lighter patches on the walls where her photos had hung and empty spaces in the bookshelf where her books had been. It should have felt freeing, but mostly, it just felt sad. This apartment had been our home, filled with shared memories and future plans, and now it was just mine again, echoing and incomplete. I walked through each room documenting what she'd taken, making sure nothing of mine had disappeared with her stuff. Everything seemed accounted for. She'd even left behind a few things I'd given her, gifts and mementos piled in a box by the front door like she was purging every reminder of our relationship. I threw the box in the trash without looking through it. The final blow came from an unexpected source. My colleague Vincent at work, someone I barely knew beyond casual office conversation, approached me in the break room 6 weeks after the breakup. He looked uncomfortable and said he needed to tell me something. He'd matched with Olivia on a dating app 3 days ago, and they'd been messaging. She'd mentioned her recent breakup with a controlling ex who couldn't handle her having male friends. Vincent had seen her photos on my desk before I'd taken them down and put the pieces together. He showed me screenshots of their conversation. Olivia had rewritten our entire relationship, painting herself as the victim of an obsessively jealous partner who'd driven her away with constant accusations and surveillance. She'd told Vincent that her friend, Liam, had been her support system during the relationship, and afterward, someone who understood her when no one else did. There was no mention of the affair, the hotel room, the months of lying. Just a story about an innocent woman escaping a toxic relationship. Vincent said he thought I should know what she was saying about me. I thanked him and felt something inside me harden. The cheating had been devastating, but this revisionist history, this attempt to destroy my reputation while playing the victim, filled me with cold anger. I decided to set the record straight. Not publicly, not dramatically, but strategically. I created a simple document laying out the timeline of events with dates, evidence, and sources. Raymond's surveillance photos, hotel receipts, Liam's text messages confessing to the affair, screenshots of Olivia's lies to Vincent. I didn't editorialize or add emotional commentary, just presented the facts. Then I sent the document to our mutual friend group with a brief note explaining that Olivia had been spreading false narratives about our breakup, and I wanted people to know the truth. I said I didn't expect anyone to take sides or stop being her friend, but I wouldn't allow my character to be assassinated when I had done nothing wrong. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends I'd thought might stay neutral reached out to apologize and express support. Several people admitted they'd heard Olivia's version and believed it until seeing the evidence. My friend Casey said she'd had drinks with Olivia the week before, and Olivia had spent 2 hours talking about my jealousy issues and controlling behavior. Casey said she'd felt sorry for Olivia until she saw the hotel photos and realized the entire story had been lies. The mutual friend group essentially excommunicated Olivia after that. People blocked her number, uninvited her from events, and made it clear her dishonesty wasn't acceptable. Olivia tried to fight back. She sent a group text calling me abusive for sharing private photos without her consent and threatening legal action. Nathan, still acting as my unofficial legal counsel, reviewed her message and said she had no case. The photos were taken in public spaces, documented infidelity wasn't protected by privacy laws, and truth was an absolute defense against defamation claims. He drafted a formal cease and desist letter outlining the evidence against her and warning that further false statements could result in a defamation lawsuit from me. He sent it via certified mail to her new address and copied Liam for good measure. The texts stopped after that. Olivia went silent on social media, deleted photos of us together, and seemed to retreat into whatever new life she was building with Liam. I didn't care anymore what she was doing or who she was with. I'd reclaimed my narrative and my reputation. That was enough. The healing process took longer than I'd expected. Months after the breakup, I'd still have moments of anger or sadness that would hit me unexpectedly. I'd see a couple holding hands on the street and feel a pang of loss. I'd hear a song we'd listened to together and have to skip it. I'd wake up from dreams where we were still together and everything was fine, then remember reality and feel the grief all over again. My therapist, Dr. Alan Winters, a clinical psychologist with 21 years of experience, helped me work through the betrayal trauma. He explained that infidelity created a kind of PTSD, where trust became difficult and hypervigilance became a defense mechanism. He said what I'd experienced wasn't just the end of a relationship, but the discovery that my reality had been manipulated for months. That kind of gaslighting caused deep psychological damage that took time to heal. We worked on rebuilding my ability to trust my own instincts and recognizing red flags without becoming paranoid. Dr. Winters said I'd done everything right by documenting evidence and seeking support, rather than trying to handle everything alone. 8 months after the breakup, I ran into Liam at a coffee shop downtown. We made eye contact across the room, and I watched him decide whether to approach me or leave. He chose to approach, which surprised me. He walked over to my table and asked if we could talk for a minute. I said he had 60 seconds. Liam sat down and said he wanted to apologize. He said he'd been selfish and cowardly, that he should have been honest about his feelings for Olivia before acting on them, that he'd betrayed my trust and our friendship. He said things with Olivia hadn't worked out the way he'd expected. They'd dated for a few months after our breakup, but the relationship had fallen apart under the weight of guilt and mutual resentment. He said Olivia blamed him for ruining her relationship with me, and he blamed her for initiating the affair. They'd broken up 3 months ago and hadn't spoken since. Liam said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just wanted me to know he recognized what he'd done and felt terrible about it. I looked at him sitting across from me, this person who'd blown up my life and was now seeking absolution, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just empty indifference. I told him I appreciated him saying that, but it didn't change anything. I said I'd moved on, and he should too. He nodded and left. The encounter with Liam gave me unexpected closure. Knowing that their relationship had imploded under its own dysfunction felt poetic in a way I couldn't have scripted. They'd destroyed what I'd thought was a solid relationship for something that couldn't survive outside the fantasy they'd created. The affair had been exciting when it was secret and forbidden, but once they had to build an actual relationship in the real world, all those deep connections and intense feelings couldn't sustain them through normal life. I thought about texting Olivia something petty, rubbing in the fact that she'd given up what we had for nothing, but I didn't. Dr. Winters had taught me that revenge was poison that hurt the person holding it more than the intended target. I'd already won by moving forward with my life while they'd crashed and burned. That was satisfaction enough. I started dating again around the 9-month mark. Nothing serious at first, just casual coffee dates and dinners with women I met through friends or dating apps. It felt strange talking about my past relationship, trying to explain what happened without sounding bitter or damaged. Most women were understanding when I mentioned my ex had cheated with her best friend. Some shared their own betrayal stories, and we'd bond over the shared experience of rebuilding trust. I met someone named Iris through my friend Gavin, a graphic designer who'd recently moved to the city for work. We went on a few dates, and I found myself actually enjoying her company without constantly comparing her to Olivia or looking for warning signs of deception. Iris was straightforward and communicative, qualities I now valued above almost everything else. When I told her about my past relationship during our 4th date, she listened without judgment and thanked me for being honest. She said she appreciated knowing what I'd been through because it helped her understand why I might need reassurance sometimes. That simple acknowledgement meant more to me than I could express. A year after the breakup, I'd rebuilt my life into something I genuinely liked. I'd gotten a promotion at work, moved into a better apartment, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Olivia, and started taking boxing classes as an outlet for stress. The gym became a community where nobody knew my history or cared about my past drama. I was just another guy trying to stay fit and blow off steam. My coach, Frank Moretti, a former Golden Gloves competitor who'd been training fighters for 32 years, pushed me harder than I'd ever pushed myself. He said I had natural aggression that needed channeling, and the heavy bag was a better target than my own thoughts. He was right. The physical exhaustion after a training session cleared my mind in ways therapy couldn't. I'd leave the gym dripping sweat and feeling accomplished, like I'd beaten something even if it was just my own limitations. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. My friend Casey ran into Olivia at a mutual acquaintance's wedding, and they ended up talking. Casey told me about it the next day, unsure if I'd want to know but thinking I deserved the information. Olivia had apparently asked about me, wanted to know if I was doing okay, if I'd moved on. Casey said she'd told Olivia I was thriving, had a new girlfriend, had gotten promoted, looked happier than I'd been in years. Olivia's face had fallen at that news. She'd admitted to Casey that leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life. She said the affair with Liam had been exciting but ultimately empty, that she'd thrown away something real for something that couldn't survive daylight. She said she'd tried to reach out to me a few months ago, but I'd blocked her on everything. She'd asked Casey if she thought I'd ever be willing to talk. Casey had told her absolutely not, that I'd moved on completely, and she needed to do the same. Hearing that secondhand vindication felt surreal. Part of me had always wondered if Olivia would ever regret what she'd done, if she'd realize what she'd lost. Now I knew she did, and it didn't matter. Her regret couldn't undo the damage or rebuild what she'd destroyed. It was just noise from a life I'd left behind. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.